Hi, everyone. It's Martha Novak, and this is a show called Real Talk with Martha Novak. We talk about all sorts of things, don't we, relative to consciousness. I'm glad to be with you this morning. I apologize for you having to look at a scarred woman. I had a place taken off my face yesterday. Not yesterday, a few days ago. No matter what I do, you know, all these marvelous ads. You won't understand this if you're a man, but if you're a woman, they have all these marvelous ads with cover-up makeup. Really works, right? Never has worked for me. If I have a scar, it's up there for everybody to see. So I've got a nice big one right there. Okay, guys, I'll try to keep that side of my face away from you. We're going to be talking about codependency and enabling today, but we're also going to be talking about interdependency, which is what we all strive for. Okay, so we've got a big show ahead of us. And I'll dive in. I'm awfully glad you're with us this morning. I'll tell you that. I look forward to seeing you every Sunday morning in one way or another, okay? Even if it's just knowing you're there and seeing your pretty picture on Facebook Live and, you know, et cetera, hearing from you. This is a live show today, so our host call-in, oops, that's the wrong number. Guest call-in number is 347-850-1647. If our technology is working, you never know up here in the mountains. But we'll see if we can't bring you in, if you have something you want to add or ask. Let's do a prayer. Get us all on the same page. And here we go. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are, and all everything is in this magnificent world, we thank you so much for all of it, for being here with you. We're all here under the banner of loving you, wanting to know more of you through us. We are the aspect of you, dear God, when all our pretenses are stripped away. And we ask to be that more and more and more. For this, dear God, on the higher energies of you, the ascended energies, is what we aspire to, that we are spiritual beings in physical form. We thank you so much, dear God. Both of these things are important, the physical and certainly the spiritual. And we work with them both in harmony and integrity and in balance. We thank you for this, dear God, for all of it. As we become and change our lives, we thank you so much for the ability to maintain the integrity of who we are, our sense of self and balance in these wacky times. Thank you, dear God, for the privilege of it all that we call life. We say this prayer now in your name and in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of everyone listening to the show today. Thank you. And so it is. Amen. Okay, so here we go, guys. I had started talking about last week, a wonderful article that I really did like. It's called The Difference Between Dependency and Codependency. It was written by Sharon Martin, and she did a good job of this. As usual, I'm going to talk about this article, but also certainly add my own spin on things. What we do here is kind of specialized in a way because it's about consciousness, it's about enlightenment, it's about opening your mind. There's a triad that takes us there. One is awareness to consciousness to enlightenment, enlightenment being the advanced levels of consciousness, right? The reason I like to sit here and give you a lot of information is because it heightens your awareness. It starts you on this marvelous journey to who you really are beyond the pretenses. And that is the aspect of God you are on the higher levels. Because the thing that confuses us about God, if you're new to me, I need to put this on the table, is that God is everything, right? It's like asking a fish, how's the water? What? How do they like it? Like, it's everything. God is everything. God is the light in the dark. God is everything. God is your ego, and your ego child's mind that is a part of you still thinks like a child. But God is also this noble ascended self that is also inside you. A lot of times we are trapped in the ego child's mind. And so through awareness, we open consciousness so that you can see in a more global perspective, right? And by the way, find balance and truth, yours, of course, and have happier lives in the end, using all of you. I told the story. I don't know whether I ever told it to you, but I certainly told it to a client of mine at one point. I had a marvelous upbringing in the theater. And one of my instructors, who was then in Atlanta, it was marvelous, had been on with the Met. And he had a beautiful singing voice. And oh my God, he was a wonderful person. So, of course, he was in charge of the drama club. Now, I don't know whether he ever saw anything in me. He might not have, quite frankly. But he did give me the opportunity at one point to direct a scene. And I thought that was just great. You know, I found my milieu as I grew older through directing and through writing, because that way you get to play all the parts. You're not limited to one, right? And I like that better. My brain goes like that. So I made a mess of this. I had this wonderful scene. I believe it was from Little Women, which, by the way, I don't like very much, just as a play. And it was a little scene. I don't know why I remember that. I'm not sure I'm right about that. But anyway, it was a little cozy scene, and I directed it on one side of the stage. And his comment to me was, "You didn't use the whole stage." There was something, even when I was a kid, even in high school, that struck me about that statement. That we are given a whole stage, ladies and gentlemen, and we're not using it. And that's why my work is about increasing your potential, saying, go out there, give it a shot, try it, let's do this, add this, learn this. Because, in my opinion, that statement by that marvelous teacher of mine was not about the scene I directed. It was about the life that I was going to live. And I offer that to you as well. Use the whole stage. That means we increase our awareness. That means we go forward. That means we reinvent ourselves at every opportunity and try new things and learn new. And when we're called to something on the inside, we do it. So many people, of course, say, oh, you know, I want this. Oh, I so want this. I have to budget for it. And it's the antithesis of, no, you're supposed to be more creative. You're supposed to make more money. You're supposed to go out there and use more talents to be able to afford what you want. Go out there and do that. In addition to knowing where your money is going, et cetera, right? All right. We still have pollen out there too, by the way. That's why I'm doing my nose. All right. That said, you know, we are working with two components of you. The child's mind, the ego child's mind, which is the lower frequencies. It's the part of you that thinks like a child, part of you that has the fixations. And nobody ever tells us what those fixations are. They're stuck energy, guys. That's all it is. And so if we can resolve those things, if we can talk about them and move the energy, they go away, and all that energy comes rushing back to you in the present time to use. That sounds like a good deal to me, okay? But you've also got the higher self. This is the love-based part of you. And this is the part of you aspire to by listening to a show like this. Again, be patient with yourself. It's always through a triad awareness to consciousness to enlightenment. I thank you for that heart that just went by. I don't see who's here today. It's not appearing on my screen yet, but I wanted to say hello to you too. All right, let's launch into this material that Sharon Martin has put forth for us, and then I'll jump in. One of the things I said that I started last week's show with, and I'm going to say today too, is that much of what I'm talking about in each and every show has to do with one question that you would be wise to ask yourself. And that is, what mind am I coming from? The ego child's mind or the higher self mind? The highest self mind. Which mind am I coming from? Because, you see, you are coming from one or the other all the time. It's also the difference between a lot of this information that we're talking about right now. If you are supporting somebody by saying, you can do this, you've got it in you, or if you're doing it for them, it's the same energy. The latter is just from the ego child's mind. The first one's from the highest self mind. Many times we say things that we think are highest self mind. I'll give you a good one that I hear all the time. I have to speak my truth, but it's said with such anger. It's said with such defiance that it's clearly the ego child's mind. Hi, John. Oh, John, you are so dear to say that. He said that I helped him, so he wanted me to know that. And John, that's precious of you to say. Thank you. You know, that makes me feel real good. You're the reason I do this. So, thank you. Very, very heartfelt and sweet. Thank you. So, we have to always tune into ourselves. What did I say about awareness? To find what mind it is that we're actually working from. Many times, you see, our highest self mind, in that last example I just gave you, doesn't have to have her fist in the air like Scarlett O'Hara, saying, as God is my witness, I'll never be hungry again. You don't have to say, this is my truth, and by God, I'm going to say it finally. That's a reaction. That means you're still in the child's mind, because in the higher mind, you're so busy and you get on with things and you're learning things and you're using your talents, gifts, and abilities, and you're working very closely with who you really are, which is your highest self, your God self, that you don't have time for silly statements like that. You're just getting on with it. You see? Now, this is a time in our lives where we are keenly challenged to get on with things. Right now, we really don't have anybody oppressing us and telling us what to believe, as societies have had in the past. Now, I'm just talking about the North American thing. If you are coming from another country, I understand that it may be different. But this is the time to think your own thoughts. It always has been, by the way, no matter what culture you're in. There is a part of you. You are the aspect of God you are, but it's our ego child's mind that get in the way. Our indoctrinations of one kind or another. Once you look past all that into who we really are, you do find out other truths to live by. I'm a poster child for the work. It works. So, please keep in mind as we go through this material that we're talking about two different minds. And it's perfectly great. I mean, you learn how to go from one mind, the ego child's mind, to the highest self mind, and you can do it like that once you get the hang of it. You keep in mind that the ego child's mind is all about you, at the expense of whoever else is there. Or it's all about them, at the expense of you, which is still, by the way, all about you because you've just made yourself a victim, which is always all about us. The higher self mind is the one that has the global perspective. It's you and me agreeing to agree or disagree. It's a win-win, right? Because there's an agreement here. It's a love-based experience. Now, I was talking to my class yesterday in a lecture, and I was saying that I want you all to realize that the higher self-mind is also the truth teller. They say it with kindness. But it can play hardball when it's important to play hardball. One of my finest teachers and dear friends was a lawyer that I worked for him and he worked for me. And we really learned from each other beautifully. And man, he could lay you low. He'd lay even his client low if he didn't feel like the client was being fair. I liked that about him. He was a good character. He was a good man. So he told the truth from that higher place all the time. It's wonderful. Sorry he's not with us still. Okay. Sharon Martin goes in to say, codependency isn't simply an over-reliance on another person. It's important to learn this word. It's an enmeshment. Enmeshment. If you want to look it up. E-N-M-E-S-H-M-E-N-T. It means that your identity, who you define yourself to be, who you really are, is intertwined with somebody else. Now, she's talking about partners here, but it can be your parents. Yeah, it can. It can be your parents. It can be your business partner. It can be an employer. It can be your children. It's an enmeshment. An enmeshment is always unhealthy, too. In a codependent relationship, now she goes on to say, your focus is on the other person so much that your needs, goals, and interests are suppressed or ignored. So I was talking to one of my clients yesterday. Forgive me, my dog just jumped down, so I'm going to get a pillow and put it at my back. I'll be more comfortable. All right, not a very pretty pillow, but it is a pillow that'll give me a little more support without the dog there, all right? One of my students in my class was saying, we're talking about her children, and she did this with her children. She gave them everything, at the sacrifice of her. I've seen many families in my practice and in my years of doing this and similar things. And one of the things that I always see is when you give somebody everything, a child, everything, they start expecting it. And they don't have much respect for you. And every time you give them something, you're telling them they're a child and they can't do it on their own. And they're angry about that. And they're angry with you. Oh, they'll take it. Take the money, though, every time. So there's something, if you recognize any part of this, there's something that needs to be addressed here. You know, if your kid comes over with their dirty clothes and dumps it in your entrance hall and expects you to wash those things and iron them and put them in a sack for him to pick up, it's not going to work. That's enabling. And you've got to encourage somebody to do it for themselves. I think the best parents do encourage their children to do things for themselves. And maybe you were one of those children they did not encourage. It's time to learn now. She goes on to say, you may be an independent person in that you're completely capable of earning a living, paying the bills, and taking care of the children. Hard work, dependability, and caretaking are common traits, by the way, among codependent people. But you have an unhealthy need to be needed, and that keeps you dependent on someone else to make you feel worthy and lovable. This is just an example. Now, one of the things I want to put on the table here is one of the exercises that I can't do with you, unfortunately, but I can tell you about it. Whatever existed in your early childhood home, whether it was humiliation, ridicule, everybody talking behind everybody else's back, that you had a role like scapegoat or hero or savior, whatever existed there, you have linked to love, because parents are supposed to love you. Okay? It could be out and out abuse. It could be violence. It could be alcoholism. Whatever existed in that early childhood home, whether your dad was a rageaholic and whether your mother was meek as a little mouse, it could be any story. The fact of the matter is, you have behavior like that linked to love. Linked. We do this physically too. Whenever I eat a peanut, and I'm not allergic to peanuts, but peanuts carry mold, and I'm violently allergic to mold, so you give me a peanut, even something clean, and my body goes, ugh, and I'm having a mold reaction even when there isn't one. Our bodies physically and emotionally link to other things sometimes. So you're wise if you will make a list of those things. Hey, but here's where your emotional honesty has to come in, because your ego child's mind doesn't want you to see that, because it thinks it keeps you safe in your limitations. But of course, that's not what we're talking about here, is it? Awareness, consciousness, enlightenment. It means going past all your limitations. Okay. She goes on to say that relationships are important. They are an extra layer of joy and fulfillment in our lives. That's absolutely true. But they're not the sole thing, right? We have to find life for ourselves. Relationships bring opportunities for growth. They build us up if they're the right kind of relationship. They can't, however, fix core wounds. They can't. Now, there are many philosophies that I happen to agree with out there that says we choose sometimes the partners that we have to fix core wounds. The child is looking for that, or it's looking to replicate that. I know a client that had a very Asperger dad, and he told her that he would always be there for her and that anything she needed throughout his life he would provide. First of all, he didn't, but it was such a nice fantasy that she has chosen partners, hoping that they will be that man that will fulfill those promises. We've got to come out of the childhood mind, guys. It's not going to work. We're never going to get it that way, because it's never supposed to work that way. We're supposed to be independent. We're supposed to use the whole stage. We're supposed to use everything that God gave us. You see. Okay. So she goes on to say, we replay dysfunctional relationship dynamics until we heal the root of the problem, which is always in ourselves. And that's why I talk to you all like we talk. We've got to fix this first. That's all there is to it. Now, she goes on to say that there's quite a difference, and I love this little chart I'm about to give you. If you all want to take notes, by all means, you don't have to. I'm a note taker because I've never had a great memory. You know, I'm so busy watching the delivery and watching other things about a person that sometimes their words are 7% of what I hear. By the way, that's usually the standard thing, that we hear 7% of what's being said. So I do always myself write things down. I'm saying all this and taking a little time so you can scurry to get a pen and paper if that is your desire, because I think what she says is marvelous. She goes on to say that understanding the difference between interdependency, which is what we're aspiring to, by the way, interdependency, which is supporting each other, lending our talents to each other. It's that utopian thing that we think is utopia. I actually want to tell you it's entirely doable, and that's what you are going for instead of codependency or enabling. That's what you're going for. You want interdependency, not dependent. I don't, not independence apart from anybody. No. This is interdependency. This is the highest level of dependency. This is the dependency that exists in your highest self. Dependency, again, here we are with dependency in the ego child's mind. When it grows up and becomes the higher self, is interdependency. You see, we square off against our issues. We're so ashamed of them. We push them away. We don't like to see them. When it's very important to acknowledge, to realize what we're doing, and only then can you let that issue, whatever it is, go on into the ascended realms and become something else. Wow! It's the same energy. It just goes from one mind to the other. So all of this squaring off against yourself, all of this pushing things away, the non-acceptance of things in you that make you, by the way, human, must be gathered back energetically. We need that. We need for you to include it, to accept it, to say, oh, yep, that's what I am. Because then we have the energy to work with in your true self. You see how it works. There's nothing bad about you, any more than anybody else has in the ego child's mind. There's nothing bad. It just is. It's just energy that ultimately will be transformed if this is your journey. Wow. So, she has a chart here that I love. Healthy dependence, which, let's call it what it is. It's interdependence, and it is what we, again, aspire to, versus codependence. So here's her chart. I love this chart. Healthy dependence, interdependence, mutual reliance on each other, a balance of give and take. I love that. I love that. I've said for years, when I'm giving relationship talks, you don't have one if somebody is the giver and somebody is the taker. You don't have a relationship, because a relationship is about energy exchanging. Friendship for friendship. You may pay a therapist for an hour or two of their time. Money's just energy. Their time is energy. That's the same thing. Okay? Love for love. You know? It can be a wonderful trade. I'll go to this movie if you go to mine. All that is a a sophisticated way of working with this interdependent energy. Okay. Codependence is one person does most of the giving and receives, and you need to know this, little support in return. Why? You've trained them that way. You've trained them not to give you anything back. The interesting thing that I've noticed for years is how ungrateful people like this are. When you start healing and you start, honoring your boundaries about this, instead of saying, these other people, saying, thank you so much for all the years you've done this for me. I recognize how healthy this is now and that I have to grow up and we have to change. We both have to grow up here. Instead, they get mad. Isn't that interesting? Does that tell you something? That you have helped them, enabled them to stay in the child's mind. Also, characteristic of interdependence is this person helps promote growth, learning, and self-sufficiency. I love that. Help promote growth, learning, and self-sufficiency. In other words, this is not about giving someone a fish, but teaching them to fish, you see? Enabling is disguised as help. Now, that's really important. There are a lot of things that are disguised as things. I found another article that's going to talk to you about the difference between kindness and enabling, right? But she goes on to say in this article that enabling is disguised as help, and it creates dependency and stunts personal growth. Indeed. Another characteristic of interdependency, it's a healthy sense of being your own separate and independent person. Your own separate person, your autonomous person, the person that you are with your own thoughts and feelings and desires, your own goals, your own attitudes. You get those. You have a right to those. I've lectured for years in my work. I call them balance points. These are balance points that you should never give up because they're part of you. They make you you. No matter who you marry, no matter who you date, no matter who you're trying to impress, whom you're trying to impress. No matter, dear hearts, it is about you retaining you. I believe in the last few weeks when I've talked about balance points, I've said mine are, and I have a lot of them, but I'll just give you the top few. I love people and animals. So I'm always going to be involved with helping people and helping animals. That's who I am. I love nature. I adore beauty. I'm very creative. And I am so creative that I take it into every situation that I'm in. Not only do I write, but I'll splash paint around. I'm not good at that, by the way. But I love it. I love to garden. I love to cook. I use my creativity to solve problems. Yours in a session and mine. Creativity is essential to who I am. It's one of my balance points. I love to read. If any of these things were missing from my life, I wouldn't be happy. And ultimately, I wouldn't be me. So if you're married, if you love to read and you're married to a non-reader, you're just going to have to find time to read. You see? If you are doing something and the other partner does not do it, then you're going to have to find time independently on your own to do it because it's who you are. It's part of what makes you you. Okay. You are a separate person. I've noticed for years, and then I'm going to keep going with her list, but this also came up in class yesterday. I've noticed for years that when people die, when a partner dies, or when a relationship breaks up, I've noticed for years that people, of course, it's an excruciating situation. I give you that. But people do better when they've retained some sense of who they are throughout the partnership. Because if you don't have your own hopes and dreams, if they're all tied to your partner, and that partner goes away for whatever reason, you're going to have to grow up then, or not. This is extremely important for you in life, to be separate and an individual, and to know what that means in detail. You see? Okay. She goes on to say that in codependence, enmeshment or merging, the merging of identity and feelings with another so that neither person functions as a whole person is the problem. Thank you, John. Aren't you sweet? He says, amen. I say amen too. Let me read that one to you again. So codependence is the enmeshment or merging of identity and feelings so that neither person functions as a whole, healthy, interdependent person. There we are. She goes on to say interdependence is in that you feel free to be your authentic self. Absolutely. Now, by the way, there isn't anybody that is born your authentic self. You know what we are born as? Your undeveloped authentic self. So the energy is there for you to be your authentic self. You understand that? Isn't that great? And here's another one of those marvelous things. If you raise that energy through awareness, consciousness, and enlightenment from your undeveloped authentic self, what do you get in the end? Your authentic self. Without the bull, right? That we've all pretended to be something else because we really do believe that we're not enough. And we are. There is a reason you're here. And it lies in your authenticity and who you really are, beyond these things that we have to decorate ourselves with, right? I know you get it. Codependence, on the other hand, loses sight of their own interests, goals, values, and instead do and say what the other person wants. It's as if there is no center here in you. You have to run after the other person. It's like running after your audience. I perhaps need to explain that one. In the theater, you have to work with a live audience, and there's a lot of give and take. They're telling you what they want, right? And that is an ideal situation when you have that sensibility and you can give it to them. That's great. You just adjust your performance. Some audiences want something very broad, the humor. Some audiences want it very subtle. Great, give it to them, all right? But running after the audience in terms of, well, what will make our theater season sell? Instead of really believing in what you've got, there are people that will say, well, our market might go for this. Let's do that. Let's just do the easy way. Let's just get their money. That's not a very good way to do business. And it isn't even economically sound because that's going to backfire because everybody's doing that. There's nothing to set you apart if you own a business like that. Okay. Perhaps you need to educate your audience and make it fun for them and help them understand what you're doing. Okay. Interdependence. Fully experiencing your own feelings. That's a bugaboo for a lot of people. Fully experiencing your own feelings. You see, you've got several intelligences. Do you know that? Well, now, I gave a lecture on 8 intelligences, and I want you to go back and listen to that show. It was a marvelous show. It was a month or 2 ago, okay? About 2 months ago, I want to say. The 8 intelligences. That actually isn't what I'm talking about right now. I'm saying there are 3 parts of you. There is a part of you that is mental, a part of you that is emotional, a part of you that is physical. All of these are ways you communicate and ways you learn, because how you learn is also the way you communicate. They're all different. My brain goes first. I mentally receive and communicate things, and then I emotionally get it right on top of that. But if you put me in a dance class, it's going to be a while before I catch on to those steps. My physical body learns much more slowly than the rest of me. Now, you're some sort of combination. Hear yourself. So many people are heartbroken in childhood, and one of the ways that we deal with heartbreak before we have anything that we can actually work through, we don't know how to work through problems, right? So what we do instead is we cut off our emotional response to things. And we think that helps. And it does when we're a kid. It sure doesn't when you're an adult. When you're an adult, all of these, I call them learning and communication aspects, need to be present in your life. Certainly, while my physical body isn't as smart as my brain and my emotional self, I'm going to tell you something. That doesn't mean that I don't live in a house where I have a lot of stairs to go up and down. I make sure that I walk when I can, when I have the opportunity to. I stretch, okay? I do, within my limitations, what I need to do. Am I going to go out there and surf? No, not going to do that. That would kill me. So it's really important to know what your limitations are to keep yourself safe. But not to find out is the problem here. Or to put ourselves in dangerous situations because we have to prove something. It's ridiculous. We are who we are, guys. You were born just the way you are. Now make the most of that. That's really what it's about. It isn't about being something you're not. And nor is it about never investigating what you are. Thank you for hearing that. It's up to every adult that doesn't feel like they have the balance in the emotional experience. It's up to everybody to go and get it. Now, if you are in front of me as a client of mine, I would be handing you a page with a lot of emotion on it. And I would say, when you are angry, take that page out and go through all the words that describe your anger. Just saying I'm angry is standing under an umbrella. Anger is made up of, gosh, I don't know how many. You may have 30 things under there. Frustration. You may feel that you are superior to the other person and that they are, so you're going to have some of that feeling in there. You're going to, be frustrated. You're going to be, good God, I don't know what. But you need to have that language. You need to know what those words are. because you really don't know yourself if you don't know what they are. But here's the more challenging thing to do. When nothing's bothering you and you're just sitting around, what are the words? When you're just sitting there listening to this show, what are the words you're feeling? When you're in there changing the cat box, when you fix yourself a cup of coffee in the morning, you're not fully waked up, what are you feeling? Because I'm going to tell you something, as an actor, which I was, as a director, there's an emotional moment under every single solitary moment that you live. I think it's important that you know what those are. And you need to go and find out and own those things. It's not just, I'm not talking about just a mental exercise. Well, I'm this, well, I'm that. And then you never think about it again. It's like, I can feel that. It's in my body. I can feel this feeling right now. Now we're getting somewhere. I'm owning this, that I feel this. Yay! Okay. In codependence, instead of feeling emotions, they tend to absorb other people's feelings and suppress their own feelings. That ain't ever going to work. Do you know that when you suppress your feelings, they come out somehow? They do. They come out somehow. I've noticed people for years who suppress their emotions. You know, there may be 3 things that bother them throughout the day, 4 things. And instead of addressing those things, then they go to bed and their body is so agitated they can't sleep. This is a great deal of our sleeplessness, by the way. This and a whole myriad of other things. I've also known people who stuff. They don't think anything bothers them. They're completely unaware. That's why we have to increase your awareness, right? And then the next thing is they have an explosion over something trivial. Well, it isn't about the trivial. It's about everything that you've stuffed. It's got to come out. So it does come out one way or another, dears. And it's a better life, and you have better relationships if you know yourself. And you can deal with these moments in a mature fashion. Sometimes we don't have parents to model an emotionally mature response, at which time we have to learn it. From a therapist or an energy worker like me, we learn it. Works just as well. The next interdependent thought is they feel safe and secure in relation. She says in a relationship, in your relationship. But I'm going to say in any relationship you feel safe and secure. I hear people all the time saying, oh, I can't make cold calls. And I don't understand that, because this is just somebody that's a friend you haven't met yet. But inevitably, that's never the premise. They're always the child. They don't want to interfere. They're afraid to. If they have an assumption that other person doesn't want to talk to them, well, let me tell you, in this day and time, if you genuinely care, I'll talk to you. But if you're bullshitting, I'm going to tell you right now, nobody can hang up faster than me. And most people feel that. The interdependent person feels safe and secure in relationships. And a lot of times there's a curiosity there. Well, who are you? I love the writer, Pat Conroy. You all know that writer? He's fabulous. Great Santini, Lords of Discipline. Oh, he's written some beautiful things. And he was such a nice man. He really was. And I'm really quite fond of him. I was lucky enough to hear him lecture about 4 times and always enjoyed it. He had the most delightful experience that I've since read about in his biographies. And he would always tell people, tell me a story. Sit down next to a total stranger. Tell me a story. Isn't that great? Tell me a story. I love that. But instead of feeling safe and secure in relationships, the codependent fears rejection, fears criticism, and fears, here's the big one, abandonment. Oh, if they really knew me, oh, they'd go away. Well, maybe you ought to find out that nobody is going to go away. Because I'm going to tell you, there could be a tight team around you and people who are devoted to you and they're not going anywhere and you still think they're going somewhere. It's in here. It's in our psyches. We are fixated that we are not enough. It's not true. We're all enough. We just got things in the way and misconceptions about ourselves. And only then will you use the whole stage once we get those out. She goes on to say that in interdependence, everybody has the ability to disagree or say no without guilt. I agree. Now, you've heard me lecture on guilt in past shows. There are two kinds of guilt. There is appropriate guilt when you've done something and you go and apologize, or you learn never to do that again, right? Or both. And there is inappropriate guilt. Inappropriate guilt might be when you've been brainwashed to be a certain way, like suppress emotion in your family, and you're beginning to open it up, and you're beginning to stand up and say who you are, and you're beginning to be able to say no to somebody instead of people-pleasing all the time, and then you feel guilty about it because you've broken some sort of old rule in your family. Maybe something's wrong with the rule, you see? And we have to open our minds to that. Maybe something was wrong with the rule. Maybe it's the rule that has to go. She goes on to say that a codependent relationship is the fear of conflict, poor boundaries, and the expectation of perfection. Codependents fear conflict. Oh, they may go away. They may abandon me. They have poor boundaries. They don't know how to protect their boundaries. Oh, wait a minute. I'm too tired to do that. I can't do that today. This morning, it was really cute. My husband has trained the dog now, even though the dog is trained to pee pads, right? We have a little dog. Even though he's trained to pee pads, my husband has enjoyed most mornings taking him out for a little walk. And we are in a very remote spot, so he can be out there in his pajamas, right, taking the dog for a walk. So this morning, he wanted to stay in a little bit, and I've got the radio show to do, and I want to prepare my talk, and I have to eat a little something so my stomach doesn't growl, and I have, I have to dressed in my Lord, I have to put on makeup, all that kind of stuff, right? So he said, would you take the dog out? And it's like, can I give up any of these things that are on my agenda? And the fact was, no, I've got to do these things. So it was like, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I wouldn't mind doing it at all if I didn't have other things, but my time is tight and there is no time for me to do that. It was interesting because it ended up that I dispatched everything pretty fast, and as he came up and worked with the technology, I did have time to take the dog for a walk. But you've got to be able to say, no, I don't have time, darling. I'll make up for it another way, but not today. Expectation of perfection. I was lecturing yesterday on shame, and a lot of time people that have shame, and by the way, often we have shame for no reason. I mean, I'm not saying that there are not things that shamed us when we were young. I'm saying that, but should we be ashamed now? I'll say probably not. We're all trying to do our best, okay? We're human. We do make mistakes from time to time. But when you have a perfection issue, which is a strategy that we often use to cover our shame, there are only two states of being ashamed or being perfect. So I had my team, when I was lecturing, do an exercise. It was the exercise. If you're a perfectionist, many people are, and you've got two states, shame or perfection, is that all you are? What else are you? And I had them write for 15, 20 minutes. What else are you? Because that's not all you are. And yet, that's what our energy fixates on. And until we wake up and go, wait a minute, I'm whole. There's a lot of other stuff going on here. And I don't need to do those two poles anymore. Then we don't heal if we don't realize those things. Another exercise for you to do when we're off the air. Interdependency. These people are honest. And I'll say emotionally honest. Nobody that listens to the show would go and take money out of somebody's wallet if it didn't belong to them. But emotional honesty is something all of us will work on our whole lives. Being emotionally honest, what motivates you in this moment to do or think or say what you're doing? Emotional honesty is really important. And we've got to be able to say, I'm human, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. You're human for a reason. Do you realize that? You are human for a reason. And that means we're supposed to work through a lot of these things, because in our humanness, we can choose the ego child's mind to be in the rest of our lives, or we can choose the higher self mind. It's all available in our humanness. But here's the irony. The only way to reach the divinity within is to accept the humanness. Isn't that something? You have to accept your humanness before you find your divinity. Often, because this is esoteric work, isn't it? Often, things that you seek are hidden in the opposite. So all of this pushing yourself away and trying to be perfect and trying to be nice when the situation might warrant you're being pissed off. There's something that is marvelous about being real. And of course, the next word is authentic. And we've all got to learn to be that, because all of us grew up, we have devices. We have devices that have kept us, we think, functioning, likable, and all of these things. We don't want to be exposed. We're probably wrong. Guys, all of that's just bull. There are reasons you learn that. I grant you there are reasons you learn that. But do you need it anymore now that you're an adult? I say no, in many cases. So, honesty and the ability to admit mistakes promote growth. If you own a mistake, you're learning from that mistake. If you deny that mistake, you're not learning anything. Do you get it? Important stuff. The codependent version of honesty and the ability to admit mistakes help promote growth is denial and defensiveness will keep things stagnant. I didn't do that. Defensiveness. How dare you? You know what I say about defensiveness? if you find yourself defensive or someone else does. You know what defensiveness is? It's actually you agreeing with the other person, but not yet being in the place where you can admit that to yourself. That's why you're defensive. Let's just call it what it is. You actually agree with the other person, but you don't want to admit it yet. Why not just stand there and listen and be? And if you don't know what to say about it, just say, I don't know what to say about that yet. Let me have time to process this, and go away and process this and get to your mature, higher self, and then come back and talk about it. And nobody gets anywhere, guys, denying. We were laughing. Denial is not just a river in Egypt. I've always loved that joke. You're not supposed to deny anything. You're supposed to use the whole stage. Okay. You keep in mind that while we're talking about your codependence, this can be any relationship you have. This can be a spouse, a parent, a child, a family member, a friend, a coworker. It can be anybody. Boss. Now, a lot of times we, how do I want to say this? Because of these links to love that I referred to earlier, these things not only need to be addressed so that you see, wow, look at what I think love is, but they need to be talked about and rethought. The need to be needed is one of them. Some people, unless they're needed, don't interpret anything as love. Wait a second now. Okay, there it is. My Blog Talk Radio went away. In other words, I certainly have clients in the past that have been very needy, and they need to be needed because they want somebody to be there for them because they're in their brain a child and they can't function on their own, even though they're functioning perfectly well on their own, right? Codependents build their self-worth on helping, fixing, and rescuing others. There's a syndrome that I work with called the victim, martyr, savior syndrome. Because what happens if you're running around rescuing everyone is, if this is done, not in the altruism that you're capable of, but if the ego child's mind is adulterating that in some way, you're making yourself a victim and a martyr. That's never going to work. This is how resentment builds. See, we all need something, don't we? And part of our emotional maturity is learning how to provide that for ourselves and when to ask for help. You know, I am crazy about being married to my husband. He is so talented. Michael is marvelous. He's talented in things that I am not talented in. And by the way, I'm talented in things he's not talented in. I'm kind of the person that does the inner, and he's the person that does the outer. It's a joke among my friends about how untalented I am with technology. I'm totally a mess. He's very good at that. And God forbid my life should ever be without Michael. But I would have to hire somebody to help me. So things could go on. I did an exercise yesterday with my team that I told you about, which was, who is the person that you are relying on right now, and what if they went away? What if they went away? What are the first 5 things that you would do to cope with that? Everybody said we grieve and we talk to our friends in our grief. We'd understand that. Then we'd have to start making phone calls. When we felt like getting back to work, we would need to get the people around us who could help us with whatever aspect we couldn't do for ourselves because we don't have the talent for it. I simply don't have the talent for it. Let me tell you, if I had the talent for it, I'd be doing this too. I have other talents, and so do you. People that need to be needed are often people that are very, very codependent, in that there are many reasons that people seek other people out in this state. And that is, if anything ever went wrong, I need somebody to help me to fix it. Well, there's always somebody to help you to fix it. I just gave you an example of that. If something happened to Michael, I'd have to go find people to fix it, to help me, to be available to get my radio show up and going or anything else. The need to be needed is also that you sacrifice yourself to be accepted and to be valued. But you can never be accepted and valued that way because there's no self-respect, and you have to have a self-respect before other people are going to respect you. So you're shooting yourself in the foot every time you do this. Every time you do this, you convince yourself there's a need to be codependent. And there isn't. A lot of times the need to be needed creates an unhealthy dependence on others for validation of your feelings, your interests, your belief, your worth, and even your existence. If those things are true, stop looking outside and let's find the answers right where they are, on the inside. You don't need somebody else doing that for you. You're already a nice person. You're already a kind person. You're already interested in your growth and your learning and your expansion. Darling, there's nothing wrong with you. All this is based on there's something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just in your way. So let's get out of the way what's in the way. Who are you underneath? Your authenticity in God. There's the reason you're here. This article goes on to say that it's never healthy to depend on others to validate your worth. Truer words have never been spoken. Isn't that the truth? You have to carry these things inside you. Now, don't think for a minute that I don't understand poor family relationships when you're growing up. I've dealt with them my whole life. I deal with them on a daily basis with people. I say, woo, those are terrible experiences that you had, that I understand how they've given you this attitude, but my job is not to let you live in the paradigm of you're worthless. I've got to show you something else. And you've got to grow past that ego child's mind idea that you're worthless, because that is absolutely not true. The need for external validation, as Martin goes on to say, leaves many codependents trapped in abusive, unfulfilling, and unhappy relationships because they feel purposeless and unlovable without the caregiver role. True. Look, I believe in taking care of people. I believe in this interdependent relationship with people. But I also believe that there's a great deal we can do to take care of ourselves. I will take care of others because I love them, But when I have nothing to give, I'm pretty honest with myself, and I say I don't have any more to give. I've got to rest and then get back to it, right? You all need to know where those lines are for you. What happens is with a lot of people who are driven by issues is they just do it impetuously. They just give. They just give. They don't want to at one point. And that's where resentment builds. So you have to do these things with a pure and gentle heart, don't you? If you're going to do them at all. And it's fine to say, no, I can't do that. As a codependent caregiver, you need to be needed, and it is so strong that you may consciously enable your loved one to remain dysfunctional and dependent, because if your loved one gets any better, sober, employed, healthy, and so on, you'll no longer have a purpose, and without a purpose, you don't feel worthy of love. Guys, we have to find our life purpose, not a purpose like this that was based on a parent in our childhood. Now, that's a pretty frightening thought for somebody who's playing this out. And your fear of abandonment can drive you to persistent nagging, giving unwanted advice, and enabling, which we're going to talk about next if we have time. Enabling is different than the kind of helping that characterizes interdependent relationships, which always encourage your loved one to become more self-sufficient, more confident within themselves, you see? Good. I think I'm done with that article. Let's look at this wonderful article that I found, and I do think this was interesting, the slippery slope between kindness and enabling. Let's talk about the interdependence for a minute. It is the way of encouraging a person to meet their own needs and desires. It is empowering them as a person, right? But enabling is a process where a person interferes with this natural state. And because of selfishness or indulgent issues, aids a person's negative attitude or behavior. Well, if you're feeling negative, that makes you feel better. There's somebody in the pot with you, huh? Enabling is the behavior of protecting others from experiencing the full impact and consequence of their behavior. Now, this article, The Slippery Slope Between Kindness and Enabling, was written by Martha Harold. Ooh, pretty name, Martha Harold. We're back to what mind are you coming from? What are you motivated by? Those well-meaning acts of kindness. Okay, that's what's on the surface. Look below. What's motivating that? Is it a child's mind issue? Is it a higher self experience? She goes on to say, maybe a neighbor's car broke down and you offered to give them a ride to and from work until it could be fixed, but it's been months and the car is gathering dust in the driveway. They never got around to doing anything about it, and they expect you to take them. I see this in business all the time. You know what I call this? A critical moment. I had a woman not long ago who it was a big office, a lot of, this was, by the way, before COVID, big office, a lot of cubicles. She was the secretary to about 6 of the directors, and she sat in the middle. And one day, somebody got real behind, and he approached her and he said, can you help me? Can you help me do this? And collate and do whatever he had to do. And she said, absolutely, I can do it. And they started talking, had a good rapport, all that kind of stuff, got the work done. That's wonderful. He did it again and again and again and again. This was 6 months, 8 months later. And she talked to me about it in confidence, and she said, I think I'm going to have to leave to stop this behavior, because she let a critical moment go by. Where was the critical moment in this? It's not the first moment she did this because she wanted to do it. But the critical moment is when she did not say, I would love to help you, this one time only thing. Or the next time he brought it, time number 2, for her to say, whoa, wait a minute, can't do that today. I was delighted to help you. That's no problem, but there's sometimes I can do it and sometimes I can't. This is one of those I can't. My favorite, though, time is the addendum to the first time. Glad to help you this first time, can't do this always. This can't be a habit. Let's just get all the rules on the table. That's the critical moment that she didn't see, that we have to put on the table now for you. Okay. Same thing here. I'll be glad to take you to work or whatever you need to do, but just this one time, so you go get your car fixed. Here's another example. During the early days of quarantining, you began shopping and running errands for an elderly neighbor, but that gesture of kindness is now an expectation. Same thing, right? You've passed a critical moment where you say, I can do it this one time, and I can do it when I can, but I can't do it all the time. Keep in mind, when you are crossing, and you are crossing your boundaries, when it stops being something you would prefer and like to do for this person, a way to extend yourself and your love, when it stops being that, you start to feel drained, confused, frustrated, and then it goes into possibly depression and resentment, feeling trapped, all those feelings. Because you're not taking care of you. You do understand that, right? There's no one to take care of you here but your highest self. You. Take care of you. All right, let's keep going. This article goes on to say, on the most basic level, helping becomes enabling when we do things for someone that they can and should be doing for themselves. That's the greatest explanation for enabling I know. You do something for someone that they can and should be doing for themselves. And enabling is a process that's really associated with toxic behavior. Pull yourself back from this. And if you've been trained to be an enabler, as many people were, I have a client whose mother trained her to be an enabler. Of course, she feels guilty when she looks after herself and doesn't do that anymore. You're going to feel a little guilty. You've got to realize that that's inappropriate. You should have been looking after yourself on a higher level all along. People, she goes on to say, people who grow up in a family affected by substance abuse often assume the role of enabler early in life as a survival tactic, keeping the family secrets and making excuses for unacceptable behaviors. We've all seen that. Anything you say inside to keep the peace and create a calmer atmosphere. But the risk of enabling occurs in many forms of life, and many times when we've left a home like that, we still are doing this, right? The truth is, there's a fine line between helping, having compassion and kindness and empathy, all things that come from your highest self, and enabling, which is part of the child's mind. We enable family members by doing chores for them because we can do it faster and the way we want to get things done. We do countless things for our children because we care, but also because we don't have to deal with the fight if they resist and misbehave. Even at work, we enable dependency every single time. We avoid delegating things we should because we know we can do a better job. Guys, we need to create win-win situations for people. You can't be in such a hurry, because what do we call that? Unconsciousness, that we are not just seeing the whole picture. In several instances that I've just named, you're putting tasks before people. You're putting tasks before your responsibility to help yourself and others in a higher way. Yeah, I understand, John. John said when he was caught in, I would assume, the enabling cycle, but I loved her so much. And that is such a dear thing for you to say. But I loved her so much. But you've got to define what that love is. You know, a lot of times we come together with someone else because we have the same issues. We may be insecure, they may be insecure, and you know what we call that? Love. It is the awareness, the growth inside us that goes, wait a minute, that's not love. That's not the kind of love I'm capable of giving or receiving. And we start understanding love in a more mature fashion. And that's what we're all doing, and that's what you're doing right now, John. I'm very proud of you. You're trying to understand who you are and love itself in a more mature fashion. One of the most powerful things I ever hear from a client is when they come in and say, you know, I don't understand love at all. I don't even know what it is. And I say, great, let's go find out. Because it's the person that says, oh, I understand everything, that I have the hardest time working with, because it's going to be years, because I got to break down the pretense first and show them they really don't know what they're talking about until they do. Okay. So when you have someone who's perpetually needy, for example, you do a little more and a little more for them because, well, they're just so darn nice, or you love them. And the truth is, it makes you feel a bit heroic. What did I tell you about the victim, martyr, savior? Same thing, right? Thank you, John. The problem is, at some point, the realization will inevitably hit home that your temporary help is going to be a long-term exploitation. John is so cute over here. He's giving me lots to laugh at. This is the point in that long-term expectation where those warm and fuzzy feelings begin transforming into rage and resentment, by the way. Okay. So let's talk about enabling behaviors. Ooh, I only have 6 minutes. Maybe I better start this next week, guys, because I've got quite a bit to say about enabling, okay? And I don't want to hurry through it. So I'm going to end the show here. I didn't realize I was having a good time. So I didn't realize we were right at the end. I'm going to say again, what if nothing's wrong with you? Except our needing to clean up things and clean up the way you're thinking about things. Bring the fixations that you've been so stuck with out into the light. John, I want to say to you, you are already a loving person. You don't need to compromise to get love back. See, if we're trying to get love back and we don't know that we're lovable, oh, we're so lucky, we'll do anything for it. And people can take advantage of that. And we enable, trying to get people to love us. Let me end with a story. So I was in a corporation, and the head of the department asked me to talk to a lovely young man. This lovely young man was very honest and was exhausted and was having a very hard time because he said, my wife has been having an affair behind my back for 2 years. And I have 2 little boys, and when we have caught her in it now, she is in bed. She refuses to get out of the bed, and I have to get the kids ready to go to school, and I'm doing everything myself. Then he went on to say, as I was listening to him talk, I said, well, what was your morning like? Show me what your morning was like, please. And he said, well, I got out of bed and I started the coffee and I dressed the kids and I got them off and I took the coffee into her because she doesn't get out of bed these days. And I said, something really struck me. And I said, she's been having an affair behind your back for 2 years and you're still making her coffee. Well, I always make her coffee. I've made her coffee our entire marriage. I said, no, wait a minute. She's had an affair on you for 2 years, and you are still getting up in the morning, and part of your routine is to take her coffee in the bed because she won't get the hell up? That's what you're doing? I said, why are you doing that? She has had an affair with on you for behind your back for 2 years. Why are you making her coffee and taking that to bed? Taking that to her in bed. Why? Tell me why. He got very quiet and he lowered his head and he said, because I want her to love me. That moment just broke my heart. A cup of coffee in bed when she has missed all the other signals that you have done for her is not going to convince her to love you. I coached him differently. I said, so here's what I want you to do. Are you not angry with her? Yeah, I am angry. He said, I am. I'm furious. I said, then don't stop making her coffee. You can tell her that you are not going to give her that coffee because that coffee's poison that you're giving her every day. You're filled with rage and resentment and need and longing and things. You're so mixed up that you're continuing to do this. That's not a good cup of coffee to give her. So tell her if she wants a cup of coffee in the morning to join you in the kitchen, and together you'll make the coffee. And if you're too angry, if you say, I'm still too angry with you to make you a cup of coffee, make your own coffee, go to work, and let her make her own coffee later. What are you doing? You're crossing your own boundaries. You're crossing your own lines of self-respect and never realizing that you are lovable. How do I know that? Because God's all you are, and God is love. But we all have to find that out for ourselves. And we all do these things like enabling and like being codependent until we realize there's something more. It's beyond the limitations you have on yourself. My dears, go use your stage. Please. I love you all. I'll be talking to you about this next week as well, as we finish our series. Guys, remember the thing you can do for me, really, is to get the word around about these shows. Please send these shows to friends of yours on social media. Talk it up, please. That really helps me. We do these shows for free, and thank you. Oh, yeah. Oh, John, I didn't realize that. Oh, bless your heart.
60 seconds.
John said that he lost his wife of 37 years. Oh, that's wonderful that you had 37 years of love. Oh, God bless you, John. That's wonderful. I'm glad you told me that. Not knowing really anything about your life, I extend my condolences and my deep love to you. Guys, have a marvelous week. I'm going to pray for you when you get off the show, all right? So you go out there and put some of this to use. And I care about you and love you, and I want you to do well out there in the world. Thank you for listening. Okay, see you next week, okay? Bye-bye.